He stood there, medal pinned to his chest, spine straight despite the tremble in his knees. As the judge leaned forward and sneered, "Remove that medal. It's not appropriate in my courtroom." A hush dropped like a curtain of iron. The entire room froze. Not from confusion but disbelief. One woman in the back gasped softly. The bailiff blinked twice, and the old man, the veteran, didn't move. He stood motionless, hands at his sides, not out of fear, but something else, something deeper, something heavier than the robes the judge wore, silent, stretched, long, uncomfortable, tense. The metal gleamed in the dim light, bronze edges dulled with age, the red, white, blue ribbon frayed. That single decoration, earned not given, seemed to defy the gavel that ruled the room. And still the veteran said nothing. His name was Harold Beckett, 76 years old, former Master Sergeant in the United States Army. 2 tours in Vietnam. 1 in Iraq years later, volunteering after 9/11, though he was already well into his 50s. 3 Purple Hearts, a Silver Star, and the medal now under scrutiny, a Distinguished Service Cross, pinned over his left chest pocket, placed not by himself, but by his fallen captain's daughter, who had asked him to wear it today in court. Harold had not come here to speak. He hadn't come to fight. He was here to testify silently by his presence for the son of a fellow soldier. A young man being wrongfully prosecuted for defending himself during a robbery. The kind of boy who saluted every flag, called every elder sir, and still believed in what America could. Harold came because someone needed to stand behind him. So he stood. The courtroom smelled faintly of musty wood and antiseptic cleaning fluid. Dust floated in the amber sunbeam, cutting across the room like a divine spotlight, illuminating Harold's still figure like a statue carved from grit and grief. His hands, calloused and trembling from decades of recoil and time, stayed clenched by his sides. And across from him, the judge, Carlton M. Hayes, glared down from the bench with the power of the system buzzing at his fingertips. "Mr. Beckett," the judge repeated, tone sharpened, "this is a court of law, not a military parade. Remove that medal or I'll hold you in contempt." Gasps rippled like a heartbeat. Still, Harold did not move. He remembered his captain bleeding out in his arms in a rice field soaked with fire. He remembered the unbearable weight of a flag folded 12 times, handed to a mother too broken to speak. He remembered the morning he woke from nightmares that never left, and how he learned to hide tears where no one could see. And now here, decades later, a man in a robe demanded he strip himself of the one symbol that had kept him alive when everything else in him wanted to die. Somewhere in the gallery, a boy shifted in his seat. It was Elijah Torres, the young man on trial. He stared at Harold with eyes like those of every green recruit Harold had ever trained, full of fear, hope, and a need to believe that someone, anyone, would stand for them. "I'm warning you," Judge Hayes hissed, jabbing a finger. "Remove it. Now." But Harold's silence wasn't rebellion. It was reverence. Reverence for every name etched on the black granite wall in Washington. Reverence for the ones who never made it home. Reverence for the idea that honor could still mean something in a world that forgot how to define it. The courtroom waited. Every breath, every rustle, every blinking eye bore down on the motionless old man. Even the bailiff hesitated, unsure if he should act. There was something sacred in the air, unseen but undeniable, and then it happened. The courtroom doors opened. First came the sound, boots on marble, a slow, rhythmic cadence that echoed through the hall like distant thunder approaching. Heads turned, faces changed. One by one they entered. Men in dress blues, Marines in silent formation, a Navy commander, a retired Air Force colonel in a wheelchair, and behind them, dozens more. Some wore uniforms, others civilian suits. All had medals. Some polished, some faded, all earned. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They walked past rows of stunned spectators and filled every remaining seat, then stood lining the back wall. Each one stood tall, each one stared forward, and on every chest a medal. They had come for Harold. They had come for truth. They had come because someone had crossed a line that could not be crossed. Judge Hayes faltered. His voice cracked slightly when he tried to speak again, but nothing came out. Then Colonel James Radcliffe, now retired, stepped forward from the— "Your Honor," he said evenly, voice like gravel smoothed by time, "if you're going to demand he remove that medal, you'll have to start with the rest of us." Another step forward. "And me," said a female major from the Marines. "And me," echoed someone else. The tide had shifted. The judge swallowed, visibly rattled. This is highly irregular, but the moment had turned. No court stenographer could capture the gravity. No law book could undo the truth of what stood before them. Because when silence holds more power than threats, justice begins to breathe again. Harold finally moved, slowly. His eyes scanned the room, not in defiance, but in awe. Not for himself, but for the unbroken chain of service and sacrifice behind him. The boy on trial wept quietly, not for himself, for what he had just witnessed. What dignity looked like when it refused to kneel. The judge reached for his gavel, but hesitated. He looked at the rows of silent warriors, then at Harold, and finally he looked down. Without a word, he dismissed the contempt charge. Without apology, he adjourned court. Without honor, he exited the bench. He resigned less than a week later. A quiet scandal covered with vague press statements and thin excuses. But everyone in that courtroom knew why. They had seen what real honor looked like. And it didn't wear robes or sit on a pedestal. It stood in silence, medal over heart, unshakable. As the courtroom slowly emptied, someone asked Harold why he didn't speak. He smiled gently. "Because some things are louder when you don't. Silence is not weakness. It's the language of those who've seen too much to shout. You can take the bench, but you cannot take a man's honor unless he hands it to you, and he never did." Outside, as the sun dipped behind the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Word had spread, and as Harold stepped into the light, hundreds stood. Not in protest, not in applause. They stood in silence, in respect, in honor, in truth.